Okay, so this is how I know I've been watching too much Fox News. Every day I tune in and I'm amazed by the human ability to cope in times of great chaos and distress. Let me introduce you to this great American wonder I found the other day. Meet MAGA Lefty. This lady right here represents a new wave of left-leaning people who have seen the light and have now accepted Donald Trump as their Lord and personal savior. Listen to how she describes it. It almost sounds spiritual. Here's her interview with Fox News. Watch.
Do you know, it's so amazing. This morning on one of the liberal channels, I saw a Democrat congressman, and he was just sitting there saying, I have no idea why President Trump is doing this. They simply cannot understand why he is implementing the tariffs because the answer is simple. He is choosing Main Street over Wall Street. He has chosen to bet on the American working class instead of on the rich elites. And this is astonishing because for 60 years, presidents on both sides of the aisle.
She said, Trump has chosen to bet on the American working class instead of the rich elites. Let me translate that for you in case it wasn't clear. She feels like bringing manufacturing back to America is going to enrich the American working class. She feels like the stock market only serves the elites. Of course, now that the market is down, it makes sense, right? The stock market suddenly doesn't matter anymore. It only serves the elites, right? See, this isn't really true, is it? Like, I invest in the stock market, as I've talked about a few times on the podcast. I have a career outside YouTube, and my savings for my retirement are mostly invested in the stock market. Because as you know, keeping your money sitting in the bank is like setting your money on fire, really, because every year your money continues to lose its purchasing power because of inflation, right? I'm not an elite. I'm working class just like you. I mean, I'm Canadian and this affects me, right? I invest in the S&P 500 like most people do. But there are Americans contributing to their 401k in the same way that we contribute to our RRSPs. The vast majority of those people are regular working class people looking to put something away for retirement. Now, the beauty of this for me is that I have a long time horizon. I'm in my 30s right now, so I'm relatively young. I still have maybe 30 years that I could work if I choose to work that long, right? Unfortunately, there are people who are in retirement right now who have seen almost 15% of their net worth evaporate in 1 month. Those people now have to worry about when the market is going to recover, right? And that matters to them because it affects how much money they will have in their retirement. And all of this is happening while there are concerns that President Trump might cut Social Security, right? You can see why these people are so anxious. You think the stock market being down really affects the elites? Yeah, they lose a few million, but by and large, they're good, right? Also, people are losing their jobs today. That's not impacting the elites. For the elites, this is a once-in-a-lifetime buying opportunity. It is a fire sale because here's the thing. They are the only ones with enough liquidity right now anyways, right? By liquidity, I mean free money, right? This is not hurting the elites like it is hurting the working class. Regular schmegular people are struggling to put food on the table today. The Trump administration is saying it will take 6 months for things to recover. First of all, they don't know that. They don't know that. Secondly, these manufacturing jobs went away over a period of 40 years. Right? You really think they're going to be able to bring it back in 6 months? You just don't know, right? Let's proceed, and you'll see why the copium is super strong with this one, with this lady right here. Watch.
The American working class. And, you know, I used to have the Trump derangement syndrome. You know, I started out as a lefty, a liberal. I really couldn't understand the draw people had to this president. But over time, I've come to see that he is simply the inheritor of the values that used to define the Democrats because they used to be the party of labor.
Was there a single moment that changed you?
So the cracks came a little at a time and then all at once. You know, the first was my rabbi, who's the best person I know, told me that he loved Trump. And I suddenly realized, well, I guess not every person who voted for him is a racist. Then I was doing a lot of reporting from the South on American polarization. And what I found was a lot more united Americans than divided us, even in this moment. It was really the elites who were polarized, but average Americans were very united. And then the kicker was in 2018, I saw a Yale study. And in this Yale study, it found that there was a difference between how white liberals and white conservatives talk to Black and Hispanic Americans. And here was the difference. White liberals dumb down their vocabulary when they're talking to Black or Hispanic people.
How so?
And white conservatives don't do that. They use a lower level of vocabulary. It's called presenting lower competence. They use smaller words when they're talking to Blacks and Hispanics than they do when they're talking to white people. This is white liberals. But white conservatives don't do that. And I remember looking at this and thinking,
Okay, where to start? Where to start? Okay, so first she says, the elites are the ones that are polarized, and by and large, the people that are working class and lower down the totem pole tend to be not polarized. Well, I beg to differ. I would say the elites have their priorities pretty straight. They care about their money, and they care that you don't interfere with their money. That's pretty simple for the rich people, right? So there's that. But also, she says, white liberals dumb down how they talk to Black people and Hispanic people. Honestly, couldn't tell you where she got that from. They said it was from a Yale study. Like, who knows? So I'm not going to touch that. But then she says, white conservatives don't talk down to people of color. Yeah, that's not true. But also, has she heard President Trump speak? I guess it's different with President Trump because he talks at a grade 2 level to everybody. Like, it's not specific to people of color. Here's something most people miss this week. I've got to tip my hat to the CBC's Andrew Chang for finding this. Did you know that when President Trump presented his reciprocal tariffs this week, you know that column where he said tariffs charged to the USA? Well, it turns out that entire column has nothing to do with tariffs that those countries charge the USA at all. Like, it has nothing, absolutely nothing to do with what those countries charge the US at all. What the Trump administration did was they took the US trade deficit with a particular country and divided that by the US imports from that particular country and multiplied by 100. It has nothing to do with the tariffs that those countries have on the US at all. So you're sitting there, you're going, well, Vietnam charges the US 90% tariffs, or China charges the US 67% tariffs. It's not fair. If anything, the US is being lenient by imposing these discounted reciprocal tariffs. After all, the Trump administration was nice enough to divide the tariffs that those countries charge the US by 2. It's a discounted tariff. But the mere fact that you buy more from another country than you sell them is not a tariff. It's not a tariff. And that, my friends, is how you dumb something down so far that there's no truth anymore, right? It's similar to the idea that Canada charges 250% tariffs on American dairy. Trump keeps talking about that. Well, we actually haven't ever charged them the tariff because they have never met the quota to get charged 250% tariffs on dairy. So what Trump is basically doing here is rage baiting, right? He's farming the rage of the American people off of many, many untruths. Here's the last part of that interview. Your head might explode. So this is just a public service announcement. Your head might explode. Watch.
And we, the liberals, call them the racists. This is the most racist thing I ever heard. And it was an indictment of the entire progressive worldview, which is based on this idea that minorities require the largesse and the beneficence of white progressives in order to thrive. And that was really a moment where I realized, wow, there's something really wrong with the left as it is, and came to see that it was President Trump who wanted to implement agenda items that would restore dignity to working class Americans. That's what this entire agenda is about. That's what these tariffs are about.
And so do you think that others are coming around to this opinion? Like, you obviously you hear feedback from a lot of people.
So the response to my Free Press column has been overwhelming. And I actually wanted to ask you, Dana, why do you think that is? Why do you think that this idea of a MAGA lefty is resonating so much with so many conservatives?
Well, I don't think it's that surprising because we are living through a political realignment. And when you go through a realignment, it takes 10 to 15, 20 years for it to happen. And so to me, I think it's just maybe a little bit of the natural order of things. And partly because I don't think it's that presidents didn't care about the working class. I do think a lot of it had to do with identity politics and the woke liberalism and also trying to take rights away from parents. And that has been a big issue. So anyway, that's my 2 cents. Do you have 2 cents?
You need to write a piece for the Free Press. But you wear your MAGA Lefty label now with pride.
I
and
do.
Thanks for sharing.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you guys so much.
Interesting perspective.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Did you guys see that pick me laugh at the end? I'm sorry, but she was really giving pick me vibes right there, right? Oh, she now wears her MAGA Lefty label with pride. My goodness. She says she came to a realization that the lefties believe that minorities require handouts from white progressives in order to thrive. I love how she has an opinion on this, but she's not really a minority. Anyways, the DEI is silent there. She's obviously throwing shade at DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Look, I think most people focus on the race and gender identity when it comes to DEI. They focus on that aspect way too much. And I've been guilty of this in the past. That's unfortunate because DEI is such a broad term. You'd be surprised, DEI also encompasses people with disabilities, right? You can throw religion in there as well. You can even include veteran status under DEI. In that sense, I feel like the DEI term is way too broad. I guess they went a little bit too far with the inclusion part of the DEI, if you know what I mean. It is rather unfortunate that we have reduced the DEI term to just race and gender. And clearly, that is what this lady believes. Under DEI, for example, we can make space in the workforce for people with disabilities and get those people to be productive in society. That is DEI too. That is under DEI too. My big issue with DEI personally is that it always seems to emphasize people's disadvantages instead of leaning into their strengths. The modern use of that term suggests that people get handouts because of their historical disadvantages, as against recognizing their successes in spite of their disadvantages. So now people perceive that those who are DEI hires in a workplace are undeserving. That's the perception now. Believe me, no one wants to feel that way. Anyways, as I round up the video, I want to bring it back to the tariffs. Let's entertain this idea that Trump is able to repatriate jobs back to America. You now have to pay American wages because you can't use forced child labor here in the West, right? We don't do that here. The only forced child labor we accept here in the West is peacocking your kids on TikTok or Instagram so that your followers think that they're cute and send you gifts. You know, before it used to be that you'd take your kids to audition after audition till they become child stars. That's the only kind of forced child labor we accept here in the West, you know. Anyways, I digress. You bring the jobs back to America, now you're paying American wages. You can't pay people $20 a day. You'll get a revolt, right? Well, the cost of that dignity is actually quite hefty, and that gets passed on to the consumers. American-made things will inevitably cost more than it would cost to make them in China or wherever, right? Here's what happens. The prices of the products will go up. Then your employer may have to increase your wages so that you can afford to buy things. That makes things even more expensive because the corporations won't give you their profits out of the goodness of their heart. Like, they won't eat into their profits because of wages. They're just going to pass that over to the consumers again. Everything gets more expensive. Worse still, maybe they won't increase your wages and you're now in a significantly worse position where you can't afford to buy anything. You see what I mean? Yeah, the jobs are coming back to America, but at what cost? And will the tax cuts really pay for all that? I will say this though. Tariffs are not all that bad. If Trump had used a more targeted approach, maybe it would have worked. Perhaps if he wasn't fighting all his allies at the same time, needless enemies, perhaps it would have worked. In the end, I think Trump will either be a rip-roaring success or America is in a load of shit. Like, absolutely in a lot of trouble. The Trump team is saying give it 6 months. I guess we have no choice. We'll have to see. But you guys tell me how you see this playing out. And if you're new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you next time. Take care, guys.